Hello everyone. Welcome to part one of InDesign. Now I'm going to sort of begin by creating a new document that I'm going to set up more or less similarly to the way you guys would set up your two boards for project 2. Although please realize that InDesign is really in many ways best suited for multiple page documents like books and in your case specifically portfolios, right? So when you open InDesign, you'll probably get a dialog box that looks like this. On the right, you'll see the Create New Document, and this is where we'll go. But just a short word of warning. The version I have here is CS 5.5. Now, InDesign is notoriously one of the least backwards compatible softwares there is, which means you can always go forward, but it's a little bit harder to go back. So CS6 is not compatible with 5.5, 5.5 isn't compatible with 5, it's not compatible with 4, etc., etc. This is just Adobe screwing around since they have a monopoly, and it's really annoying, but what can you do? So just be aware that if some of you guys, might have, Adobe CC installed on your own computers, it might not work with the labs CS6. You can go from 6 to a newer version like CC, but it's hard, or you have to do a separate, very different export process to be able to go back to older versions of CS of InDesign and open those files. Okay, so that's just sort of keep in mind that if you're going to start working with InDesign, try to keep your versions consistent. So after clicking on the document option, you'll get this. Usually I just leave this to print. You can choose if you want facing pages. In this case, we do want facing pages, like in the book. So you're able to have them side by side. And you can set how many the number of pages. I usually don't worry about this too much since it's easy to add afterwards. In the page size, obviously you won't find the page size that we have specified for your boards. So you'll go down here and click on custom page size. And if this is a page size, like poster format, or you can give it a name and save it. So you can say 24 by 36. And then here, it starts out with millimeters. You can change the units easily. So width 26 and in inches. Oops, 24 by 36 space bar in, and say OK. And so that'll come in. It'll automatically convert these settings, and we can change that later. And just say OK. So you'll see a representation of the 24 by 36 board. On the right side, you have all your palettes. Usually, you pull this out. This is the pages, sort of browser, if you will. You have the layers and you have the links. These are the three main ones that you work with in InDesign. There's a lot less sort of tools and stuff in InDesign. It's a little bit more simpler. On the lower right here, you have a delete new page, create new page, and delete. That's the trash can. So if you click here to get new pages, you'll see they'll come in this format. I'm going to adjust I'm going to right click in the sort of blank space and adjust my panel options really quick, so I can get a slightly larger thumbnail preview of my pages. So these are the pages. I usually sort of adjust the box so you get this sort of relationship. And this is basically these are sort of facing pages format. Right now you can reorder these by sort of dragging them, highlighting, holding on shift to sort of multiple select, and you can sort of drag them around to reorder them like that. We'll get into this sort of management stuff a lot later, but just wanted to show you guys that. Okay, so the first page is always like this because it's assuming it's like the cover of a book or whatever by default. So you might have to create the third page to get this situation where your boards are side by side. Now you'll notice that even if I delete that first page, it'll do this, where your boards become like this. It'll automatically bump that first page into the cover position. So if I just undo that, what you can do is you can right click in this blank spot and uncheck the allow document pages to shuffle. That is the sort of automatic reordering or sort of shuffling all the pages upwards sort of function. So now if I delete it, these will stay like this. So this is what you basically want to aim for, at least in this case. So these are the two 24 by 36 boards. Use Control minus, Control plus to zoom in and out, just the same as in Photoshop and InDesign. And this is the sort of workspace or the desktop where you put your elements. Okay. All right. So these are the example files provided with you to do this exercise. Although I would suggest that you can try and importing your own images or drawings, photos, whatnot, just to get a handle over things. I'm going to be using these for this example. Now you'll see that in one folder I have a couple drawings like this, section drawings, diagrams. I have a couple folders. These are model photos. This is a Photoshop file, and this is an Illustrator file. Right? Now, the reason I've done this is to kind of show some of the linking functionality of InDesign. And to kind of insert, let's just start. There's two ways to insert or place links, images, whatever files into InDesign. And very simply, the one I always like to use, especially for photos like this, is to just arrange it like this and drag them, drop them into here, right? And you might have to click on the InDesign sort of window to make it active, right? And then you can just put them in, and you can essentially put in a large quantity that way. I usually do this on the side because it's very common that when you insert things, you'll have to resize them, right? And it's easier to have them on the side as a group and then resize them using the percentage display here. Usually when you insert these photos, they tend to be fairly large, and if you need to resize them in bulk, this is the fastest way to do that. Select them all, and then you can say give it 75% up there. So you're sort of resizing them, and you're also keeping your photo sizes consistent, because these tend to be photos out of the same camera tend to be the same size, same aspect ratio, etc., right? So it makes a lot of sense to try to group them and keep them together. Now when I'm doing layouts like this, I often just sort of, to kind of get a sense of what the elements that need to go in here, right? I often just drop everything I have in here. Besides the drag and drop method, one of the other methods you can use is to just sort of go to File and Place, and you'll see the shortcut for it is Control D. And I'll go to my desktop, InDesign example, and in this case I will place a Photoshop file. Sometimes you'll have import options when you're placing files. It doesn't come in, that doesn't show up if you're using the drag and drop method. So say open, and you'll see that in the case of, let's say, a Photoshop file, you actually get to pick several things. Do you have an alpha channel transparency, or do you want to bring in specific layers or not? that's a much larger drawing. And so I'll do the same with the Illustrator file, and you'll see that because I have those options, I have some options in terms of the import. So that's an Illustrator diagram. And just drag and drop these three. Whoops. Go. And if it's doing this, just remember to click over. Okay. Now this is a little less of a problem usually because we're doing these on larger boards, but if you have a smaller sort of size, like letter size or tabloid, sometimes these images come in really huge, right? And they sort of cover the whole thing. So just remember that you can sort of zoom out a fair bit, and to kind of zoom into, you know, the page size, Control 0 is the shortcut. It basically zooms in so it's the size of the page. All right. So a lot of these sort of organizational things and transforms you should be kind of used to right now. The main difference, as I sort of mentioned in the lecture before, is that this sort of representation of the objects, the frame is different from the content. Okay, and in all of these, you can basically, if you just drag the borders of the frame, it has nothing to do with the image that's inside it. It's basically just a sort of resizing, you know, in this case, a sort of resizing of the base image. And you'll see that when I drag the frame, it also shows me a sort of ghosted preview of, you know, the image that's the content that's within, right? If I want to get that back, I could just like right click here, go to fitting, and fit frame to content. There's a lot of options here, so you can look at that. But fit frame to content, which basically pushes the frame back to the size of the content. Just so if I needed to kind of get something like that back, sometimes. Right? Now to scale, you will actually have to hold down Control Shift before you drag, and then your frame and content will scale together. Right? If you only hold down Shift, or you just sort of, it will force proportional, but it'll only drag the frame. So get used to it. In InDesign, when you're sort of scaling things, Control Shift is to sort of scale both of these together. All right. And when you have this sort of frame editing method sort of active, you'll see that you get these, when you hover to the corners, you'll get the little rotation button, right? So you can actually rotate things. Holding down Shift will snap it to 45-degree increments. Otherwise, you can always just actually put in a rotation angle up here. So this is negative, and if I type 0, then it just pulls it back to horizontal, right? So here's the rotation angle. And you can actually specify XY locations in here, and width and heights right here as well. Okay, so let's cover some of the basic functions of sort of organizing things here. You can move things together like this, and if you're within the boundaries of a page, you'll see that InDesign exhibits a lot of the sort of aligning, snapping behavior automatically. And it'll sort of snap to objects like that as well. You can use your arrow key to nudge things. Holding down Shift while you use the arrow key nudges it in larger increments. Right? So I'll sometimes use that a fair bit. But for example, for a photo cluster like this, when you're organizing them as sort of graphical elements, I'll often sort of do this. Cluster them together, depending on how you're thinking of arranging them, right? So in this case, maybe let's just arrange them into a grid like that. and I'm eventually going to put this on the side. So I'm going to make this larger, holding down Control Shift. And you'll see that when I do this, I can actually just snap it to the size of whatever I'm trying to sort of align it with. Now you'll see that because of that, you can sort of easily compose your element into a larger visual block of things, right? And I'm just going to assume that there's a large rendering up here. Now this sort of border, this sort of purple border there, is the sort of usual offset for just to kind of make sure that your printer is, unless you're printing full bleed to the edge of the paper, this is the sort of standard offset. So you should, in most cases, try to stay within that. And let's just say okay, this is going to extend to the side. All right. Now you'll see that this is the sort of normal display mode, and that's sort of half off the screen. But if I go to View, and instead of the screen mode, this is preview mode. And usually you're working in normal mode, which kind of shows you all this, shows you the frame, shows you actually in this case which layer your elements are on. So these are layers as well, and all of your objects are on these layers. If you go to your sort of layers palette, so the color of the frame shows you what layer they're on. For the most part with InDesign, I don't think you need to worry about that too much, because you usually won't have too many overlapping elements. But if you do, then it's the same as Photoshop or Illustrator. You make a new layer like that, and double click on it to give it a name. So let's do text on a different layer eventually, and if I make a text layer, then it'll have a separate frame color. So if I make this text layer active, and I'm just going to use the text tool here, right, and make a text box, and right click here, fill with placeholder text just for now. So you'll see that the text box, because it's on the text layer, it's this sort of red color, right? So this is how you kind of tell which layer things are on. And same thing, you can hide them, you can lock them. The sort of basic operation is very similar. Okay. Now, if I change my view, in this case to my screen mode to preview, then this would be very similar to what you see if you're exporting or printing this sort of ensemble, these images as is, right? It basically hides all the extraneous stuff and just shows you as an image. Now the thing with these sort of photos is that I personally usually tend to avoid situations where photos are like snap or are basically butt against each other like this. So what I'll often do, and actually let's sort of realign this really quick. Make sure that these are sort of snapping together correctly. They should be the same size. Okay, so sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually move these apart, by using the nudge tool. Maybe that's too much, just like 1, 2, 3, right, like that, and then select the bottom half, bottom 2, 1, 2, 3, just nudge them apart a tiny little bit, and this guy, 1, 2, 3, all right, and then just sort of resize it so it's like that. Okay, so there's a tiny little sort of border in between things, and this will look a lot better. And then if you select them, then I'll use Control G to basically group them. Go back to normal. Okay, Now, once you group them, then you can hold down the Control Shift to sort of resize them, and they'll sort of maintain the same, relative position. I'm going to basically sort of try to cram things in here, and if you're sort of actually looking at this diagram, then you'll see that, okay, I can easily sort of at this point readjust the boundaries of the objects that way. Let's pull the text over. What was that? Okay. All right, so some of these are really large, some of these are really small, and let's just say, okay, the photo. So this is the stage where you'll see that you can sort of mess around with a lot of different formats in terms of composing your objects. Now, this case in particular, these sort of section drawings, there's a lot of wasted space in front, right? So let's say I want to kind of rearrange these two so they're actually side by side. And this can be easily done by adjusting the frame, right? Now, the other thing to remember is that you can actually easily duplicate the same sort of linked object by holding down the Alt key, selecting the object first, holding down the Alt key, and you'll get this sort of display, and just dragging. All right, and usually when I do this, I kind of try to align these side by side so I know where things are. And you can, so let's say I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, and just sort of bring it. Okay, so these are the two sections that we're looking at, and let's try to make the height more or less similar, right? And because of that, now I can shorten this a lot more without wasting so much space in front. So you can sort of recompose how much space these take up. I'm going to put that and then use the Shift nudge to nudge them apart, select a specified distance. You'll see that a lot of these dimensions are in millimeters by default. If you want to change that, you can go to Edit, Preferences, and Units and Increments, and just sort of change the ruler units to, let's say, inches, etc., etc. So all of your sort of rules and units can be changed here. So that might make a lot more sense to you, right? The sort of sizes of the objects are here. And so the same thing, I'll sort of group this so I can size them together. Now, the nice thing about this is that, okay, if I have the frame size roughly set, you'll see that if I double click on an object, it'll go into the sort of content movement mode, and I can sort of adjust its position and composition within the frame as well. So maybe I don't want to see this much ground here, so I would adjust it like that. And I can do the same with this one. You can sort of drag it around, or you can just use the nudge tool, use the arrow keys to nudge things. But in this case, we're sort of trying to align the ground so they match up roughly. So let's do that. Right, so this looks kind of continuous, right? And then I can group that. Control Shift to just sort of size it to something that seems, let's say I want this to basically bound and cross the bottom. Oops. Of the page. Okay. So these are just some of the basics that you'll need to know in terms of just very simply kind of arranging things on the page. being able to kind of reposition your elements in a way that makes sense. I tend to not to, but you can drag. If you sort of click on the rulers, you can drag these sort of guides in, the same way you can do it in Photoshop to help you arrange or compose things if you want. All right. So I'm going to sort of mess around with this a little bit. And I'll see you guys in the next video.